Hello, this is Blue Veins, and this channel focuses on the perception of, and lived experiences of ambiguous mixed-race people of African and European ancestry. FYI, I'm not always going to be this academic sounding. I code switch like a mofo, and I get a little scandalous here, so be warned. Now, on to the topic at hand. I'd like to call it Mulatto Musings, White Dad versus Black Dad. Now you see, I'm trying to see, I put a little bit of bullet points here to try to be organized. Not that many. This might be a little scattered, but we'll see. So first off, I am obviously ambiguously mixed. I'm actually triracial, if we want to be technical. I don't have a whole lot of Native American ancestry, however. I took two different tests, 23andMe, and I think the other one was my heritage. I think that's the other one I took. They had like a special going on. It was only like $30-something. I said, why not? But both of those similar-ish. 23andMe put me at around 7% Native American, and my heritage put me at about 10%. So I consider myself a little more on the mulatto end of things as opposed to strictly triracial. I feel like those people are a little more evenly mixed, like a lot of Hondurans and people in South America. But anyway, so I am half African American. My mother is African American, and my father is Puerto Rican. However, he is white. And when I say that, I mean he doesn't look, English or anything like that, but definitely they always thought he was Italian. Definitely got that comparison. To me, he looked like, I think 80s Nick Cage, maybe a little Sylvester Stallone, but mostly Nick Cage. I can pull up some pictures for some comparison. And my mom was more like, she was a little ambiguous herself in a way, even though she came from, and mixed appearing. So my mom was more like a Tisha Campbell, Queen Latifah, kind of Sinbadish. We're looking at that red with freckles, really light skin black. And she has her own experiences that she's dealt with that whole thing, growing up in an entirely black family, but kind of being the odd one out like that. But anyhow, so that's my background. My mother's African American, although very ambiguous herself, and my father is what we would consider a white Puerto Rican. I even speak Spanish really on my dad's side. It's really the elderly people who do. They really never taught us. They didn't really emphasize that, and I believe that's because when they got here, like in the 50s, and being as white as they were, I imagine that there was a lot of pressure to drop Spanish, to drop the accents. Although that wasn't very successful. All the old people on the Puerto Rican side, they look very white but sound very Puerto Rican, just straight from the island. It's kind of hilarious. So, but they didn't really pass it along. So I'm trying to learn Spanish more myself now, which isn't that great because you end up kind of with a hodgepodge accent. So they kind of look at you funny. But so that's my background, long-winded. But I grew up in the Northeast. And things up there are really racially striated, or rather stratified. People think that the South has more of a divide, and I do not think so. I think the North, by far more racially divided. People tend to be more friendly about it, but they are also very much to themselves. Everybody goes to their own corner of the city, their own churches, their own funeral homes. Everything is separate. So I very much had a biracial experience growing up, and bicultural, because my Puerto Rican side being white, they assimilated into some very upper crust Caucasian areas, and all of them just about married into white. So I was definitely the darkest one on that side. But then on my mom's side, where everyone was much darker, we're thinking like most of my cousins and whatnot, we're thinking like Michael Jackson to Whoopi Goldberg types. So I got the experience of being the lightest one on that side. And everything from language difference, culinary difference, everything, you name it. And I'll get into all of that with different videos. But in this era, growing up in the 80s and 90s, more 90s, but in this era, I can definitely see how having a father that was coded as white and perceived as white definitely allowed me far more privilege than if I had had a black father or a father that was perceived as black, considering how racist the society was just in general. Like, for example, my father went through this phase where he was fully legally able to carry. And so he would have these, he had these shoulder holsters, these double holsters. And he looked like some guy in like a cop movie or like a superhero movie. I don't know. He looked very badass, but it was also like something I realized that if my father was black in these towns, walking around with guns open carried in double shoulder holsters, I'm pretty sure we would have had a lot of trouble. Definitely getting pulled over and things like that. I never had that growing up with my dad, though. Definitely got a chance to reap some of that white privilege, as controversial as that might be. His aunts and whatnot were very wealthy, and we got into some very exclusive towns and places, and I can't help but realize that that would not be the case if my father were a black man, because at this time where I grew up, black people just weren't even in these areas, like, ever. Like I said, I was usually the darkest person when I was on my dad's side, wherever we were. And it was definitely the opposite on my mom's side. And the economic difference was also very palpable. This was more of an affluent area in general. I'm not going to give away the exact state, but it's considered one of the wealthier areas in the country. And my dad's side was on the wealthy area, and my mom's side, they were all in what was considered the ghetto. So it was very much a very striated, stratified place at the time. And the privilege was palpable, was very real. And I think a lot of people don't like that truth with white privilege. And when it comes to a patriarchal society, having a father with white privilege will definitely, just on a baseline, kind of get you farther. That's not necessarily the best thing, but it's the truth. And I also noticed it was very odd being one of the only ones with my mix and my breakdown, because every other mixed kid had a white mom as opposed to a black mom. So I was one of the only ones with a black mom. And then when they did have a white parent, that parent was like, Anglo-Saxon white, or just, some other, random European American ancestry. And my father was Latino, which, a lot of people don't even realize you can be white and be Latino, which is so bizarre, because literally being Latin is like Roman based. I don't understand how it's not known by now, but people really do still have a hard time wrapping their heads around that one. I can show some examples right here of like the kind of Puerto Ricans on my dad's side. They are definitely light eyes, light hair, very pale. In fact, funny story, I have an aunt who's a natural blonde, and in high school she wanted to play a Puerto Rican in the West Side Story production that they were putting on, and they refused to allow her to play a Puerto Rican because they thought it was too confusing to the eye. So they made her play an Italian. And even for an Italian, she looks pretty Germanic with that blonde hair. So definitely my family is not the typical Puerto Rican family. But anyways, I'm getting a little long-winded and scattered about that. But I see a lot of this discourse in the mixed race and multiracial mulatto community here on YouTube, the goldensphere, whatever you want to call it, about, white moms versus black moms. I see that a lot, white moms versus black moms. I've never seen a video about a white dad versus a black dad. And I think that's because a lot of men are going to be very sensitive about those talking points in a patriarchal society where power and money and just kind of all of those masculine markers are divided based on color. But it's true and it's real. So I think it's worth examining. For one thing that's definitely odd, and I don't think that biracials, like a biracial guy or mulatto guy with a white mom, I doubt when he's a teenager and they go out and about, I don't think anybody wonders if they're a couple as opposed to mother and son. Whereas I had the uncomfortable experience a few times being a teenager out with my dad and gross older dudes just assuming that for some reason this young teenage girl was with this older dude just because my father looks far whiter than I do. That's not something I see as much happening with mixed race guys with white moms as opposed to us mixed race ladies with white dads. So there's this weird sexualization that seems to come into play that's very unsavory. My father definitely hated that. And I'm just trying to see what else I can convey here because there's just so much and it's just really not spoken on enough. Now, let's see. Okay, now definitely I want to speak on the opposite of privilege. I've noticed a lot of the kids I ran into, and this is going to speak on some not so nice stereotypes that are actually proven true by statistics, But every other mixed kid that had, the typical breakdown, white mom, black dad, their dads were usually not in their life. That is just the truth. I'm trying to think if I could even remember one whose black dad was in their life, and I actually cannot think of one. That's actually pretty sad. But if I'm going to be 100% honest, not a lot of the white guys that got with black women that I knew of, like I said, it was very rare, but growing up and as an adult, when I met people with similar breakdowns, a lot of their dads didn't stick around either. And I'm going to go into that in another video about the kind of white men that usually tend to get with black women, because they seem to be not always the best characters, and that's why they tend to also disappear. And once again, I know that that's not going to be the best received opinion, but honestly, you can look up statistics and kind of trace that on your own. And even just anecdotally, look around you, I was one of the few. I know, let me think. There was one other lady, and she was black, and the white man married her and stuck around. And I'm trying to think of anybody else. And that is not, nope. So, now my parents didn't last that long, although my father did marry my mother. I was maybe about 5 or so when they divorced. The cultural and racial differences just got to be way too much on top of personal issues. The stories, I can go into some story times. It is ridiculous considering they're not even not that I would justify it if they looked like polar opposites, but my dad and my mom weren't like the yin and yang sign. They weren't so opposite that it was like, oh my God, this is so stark. This should cause all kinds of problems. But the way the families handled it, you would think it was the most ridiculous pairing. I have no idea why it was so tough, but, time, it's the time period too. Things were a little less woke, a little less accepting back then. Now it's not, I'm starting to see a resurgence of some of that, old way of thinking. So I don't know, but up until recently anyway, in the 90s to 2000s-ish, we saw a lot more acceptance. And I think that was also hand in hand with the rise of the biracial, multiracial movement. Around 2000 to 2010, we saw a lot of mulattoes and biracial people fighting for their own designation on the census again, the natural hair movement, all this stuff about embracing who you are. So I think that went hand in hand with a lot of that sort of open, accepting attitude. But now I think we're starting to backpedal a bit. It's an election year. Things are getting really weird and hateful. So, it is what it is, though. Everything is a cycle. I love history. So when you do a lot of history research, and I'm definitely going to be getting into some historical stories about mulattoes and biracials and lived experiences on this channel, but when you really go into history, you see so much as a pattern and repeated, and here we are kind of inching backwards, it seems. So there is that. But as far as this subject matter is concerned, I'm trying to think if I have much more to say. Like I said, I did not do many bullet points for this one. I will definitely put some more bullet points to organize my thoughts a bit better for the next videos. This will certainly be a series, though. I like the idea of Mulatto Musings, and, you know, just all sorts of different experiences and perceptions and opinions. Musings from a mulatto. And I know, technically triracial, but, you know, it's not that visible on me. So I embrace it, but I kind of just identify more with the mulatto experience. So it'll be Mulatto Musings. And stay tuned. You know, I'm going to be uploading different series, different historical tidbits, new channel. I'm definitely excited to join the community, see what's up with this rising goldensphere, mulatto community, MLS, exoticals, all of it. I see it and it's very exciting. I actually am a long-term commenter on a lot of the videos in this sphere. I never had a picture though, and I'm going to kind of stay like that because I'm not sure just how controversial I'm going to get here. This is a warm-up video. We're going to see. I'm going to test some waters because not all my opinions are going to be super mainstream. But anyway, stay tuned, and till next time, see you soon.